I've been here in Moscow on scene since about 3 p.m. Since I've been here, I've watched Moscow police cars come in and out of this neighborhood, where officials found 4 people dead. Neighbors say they began noticing police cars flood the area around 12 p.m. today. Moscow police say they responded to a call here on King Road for an unconscious individual. Upon further investigation, officials found 4 people dead. While police investigated the scene, the University of Idaho enacted a shelter-in-place alert as university officials reported a homicide near campus. As we've stated, that alert is lifted at this time. Neighbors say most people living in this area are a part of U of I Greek life or are students, but we do not know the identities of those involved or who lives at the residence. Officials are investigating. This is a very much developing situation, and we will continue to stay on the grounds until we have more information to report back to you. Until then, in Moscow, Janelle Finch, KREM 2 News.
So police still have this house here near University of Idaho taped off. This right here is where officers found 4 bodies yesterday. We now know the names of those 4 students. They were 20-year-old Ethan Chapin from Conway, Washington, 21-year-old Madison Mogan from Coeur d'Alene, 21-year-old Kaylee Goncalves from Rathdrum, Idaho, and 20-year-old Dana Kernodle from Avondale, Arizona, and they were all University of Idaho students. Here's a breakdown of the timeline from what we know so far. Around 1 p.m., we heard reports of a homicide investigation near the college campus. An hour later, the school put out an alert on social media. It said Moscow PD is investigating a homicide on King Road. They asked the community to stay away from the area and shelter in place as a precaution. Around 3 in the afternoon, KREM 2 arrived in Moscow. Neighbors said most people living in this area are a part of U of I Greek life or are students. At around 5 in the evening, the Moscow Police Department confirmed they had found 4 people dead, but it wasn't until late last night that they confirmed those victims were students. The university also said Moscow police do not think there's any active threat at the moment as they continue their investigation. Classes for University of Idaho students are canceled for the day. They say they will resume classes tomorrow. In Moscow, Nicole Hernandez, KREM 2 News.
Idaho authorities say they are, quote, making progress, unquote, in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students, but they're still not providing many details. Police told CNN today that they have interviewed more than 90 people and received at least 700 leads. Investigators also said they found a dog at the home where the students were killed. The dog, who is seen here with one of the victims, was found unharmed. But at this hour, there's still no suspect in custody and more questions than answers. CNN's Natasha Chen took a look at the police response. This is her report.
The incomplete and sometimes contradictory information came in the first days of the investigation.
We believe this was an isolated, targeted attack on our victims.
Those words echoed in the press, perhaps leaving the impression that the police knew something that should make the public less worried. But some residents and neighbors near the crime scene were not comforted by the terms targeted and isolated.
At first, I thought that they actually had something going, so you think that makes sense, like, oh, it's targeted, and you wait to see, what they say, but now they've said nothing and that they know nothing. So how can you say it's targeted?
Then the local mayor went further, telling the New York Times it could have been, quote, a crime of passion, later clarifying that was just one possibility.
They don't want people to panic. And yet, unless you have the evidence that you are willing to share with the public and be transparent about how the investigation is going, these words are completely giving false confidence.
But police say they can't share their entire case for fear of compromising the investigation.
You can't just put that out into the public's eye. It would impede the investigation, and ultimately it might impede justice at the very end of this.
But with no suspect identified, many students packed up and left town.
There's no perp caught or anything, so it's definitely uneasy on campus right now.
By day 4, police recognized their assurances of public safety weren't resonating as residents fixated on the fact a killer was not caught. Police Chief James Fry went before the cameras.
We cannot say that there's no threat to the community.
Still calling the crime targeted, but pulling back on assurances there was no public threat and pledging to release more.
I probably should have been standing here a day or so ago, but I'm here now.
Between 2016 and 2021, there were no murders in Moscow. So when the quadruple homicide stunned this town, the 36-person police force was pressed into unprecedented action. With no full-time communications staff,
the messaging was a little bit off.
Idaho State Police were brought in to assist with public messaging.
And really put out, hopefully, the best information we can.
But the rumor mill has been hard to control. A report of a man loitering at a food truck near 2 of the victims was knocked down by police, who later said they eliminated the man as a suspect. Reports that someone's pet dog was, quote, skinned 3 weeks before the killings are also believed to be unrelated. Meanwhile, police are trying to protect the integrity of the investigation.
If you flood the public with information of everything that's going on, then stories might start emerging.
Stories are already emerging. Rumors are emerging.
Yeah, unfortunately, rumors are out there. People want answers. A lot of times, or all the time on TV, these are solved within 60 minutes. There's an appetite to make sure these are done, and we totally respect that, and we will put out as much information as we can, as soon as we can.
Though some victims' families have expressed frustration with a lack of information,
together we want to extend gratitude to the following.
This week, the family of Ethan Chapin acknowledged answers and justice can only come now from police.
The Moscow Police Department, who now carry the burden every day, not only for us, but for all of the impacted families.
I asked about the threat level to the community given the initial confusion of that message, and Aaron Snell here told me that it's always a good idea to be vigilant since the suspect hasn't been caught, saying that it's a good idea to walk in pairs, to lock doors at night, and he did not rule out the possibility of perhaps more than one person responsible for these killings. I also asked about this being a targeted attack, and he reiterated that they still believe that it was, based on evidence found at the scene and the fact that 2 people in the house survived the attack. So if it were a bit more non-discriminate, that perhaps everyone might have died. We hope to hear much more information coming out at a press conference tomorrow at 1 p.m. local time. John.
Natasha Chen in Moscow, Idaho. A terrific report. Natasha, thank you very much.
Dozens of interviews, bags of physical evidence. Police still need the public's help to find the killer, and they're getting it, especially on social media, where crime-solving groups are popping up nightly, analyzing clues and highlighting theories. My next 2 guests see them all. Christine Cameron and Alina Smith oversee the University of Idaho Murders Case Discussion Group on Facebook, and about 13,500 people have joined and counting, and they are here with me live. Christine, let me begin with you. You've been passionate about, solving crime since John Bonet and Madeline McCann. So let me ask you about your group members zeroing in on Venmo and the public activity that they've been able to see between these victims and what they've been spending their money on. Can you explain what they've seen?
Yes. Hi, Ashley. Thanks for having us. You see a lot of normal transactions between friends and roommates, paying each other for pizza and coffee. We see that on November 12th at 1:59, Ethan sent Kaylee money. The caption said, "Thank you." Then at 2:10 p.m., he sent her money again with a note that says, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." But when group members looked at Ethan's Venmo, a new Jack came about. Ethan paid someone named Jack Katovich at 11:40 p.m., and that is his last Venmo transaction. Not to say there's, anything wrong or suspicious, but that's just a new character that comes for people to talk about on social media. But someone went a step further in our group and did some digging. They posted that someone paid Jack's sister that day and captioned it 3:30 a.m. That time they felt was really unsettling. And Jack K was also the first person to donate to a memorial fund for Ethan in the amount of $6. And people are really reading into that a lot. Why $6? Now Jack is really just a topic of conversation, and people want to hear more about it.
Wow. And a 3:30 a.m. Venmo captioned 3:30 a.m. Jack's sister. Fascinating. Alina, can you weigh in on why a lot of people in the discussion group have been focusing in on the potential target as actually being Xana and Ethan, not necessarily where all the focus is on Kaylee and Maddie?
Hi, Ashley. Mostly because there's an eerily similar murder that happened in Oregon about August, and it also happened on the 13th. And it was a man and wife couple that was attacked. The murder weapon was a knife. It happened between 2 and 3 in the morning. And they believe that Kaylee and Madison were just collateral damage, and everybody has it backwards. There's a theory that migrated from a Reddit group that someone may have just followed Xana and Ethan home from the Sigma Chi party, and they were the ones that were intended for the murders.
Christine, I have a couple seconds left, but tell me about the general consensus when it comes to the surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk.
So, there's two camps. Some say that they believe they believe the police when they say that they've been cleared. Others say, this delayed 911 call, the locked doors, calling friends over before they called the police, just seems way too suspicious.
What you have been doing is absolutely fascinating, ladies, and I would love to have you back next week as well, because clearly this story is not going away. And for our viewers out there, we have a link on our News Nation Facebook page to Christine and Alina's page. It's called the University of Idaho Murders Case Discussion Group. So make sure you check that out. Christine.
told her I'm everything. You say that I don't. Like, I told her I'm everything.
So I went to the University of Washington, which is in Seattle, and Wazoo, WSU, across the state, is just across the border from University of Idaho, as Dan was just outlining there. It's 8 miles away. For us, we would drive over and spend weekends going to both campuses. So I think oftentimes when we hear about crimes or things that happen, we tend to think of them within the situs of a state or a city, but really it now makes so much more sense, given that, as always, the killer seemed to be the one that was right next door, but here it just happened to be Washington State next to their Moscow, Idaho.
Right. You're thinking maybe this is somebody who was a student at the campus, for example, and you think, oh, another state, but the other state, as you said, is only 8 miles away. The two big questions I have is the why and the how here. Why did this happen? Because when we interviewed Steve Goncalves on the 5 yesterday, he was asked, did you ever hear this name before, the name of the suspect who was arrested? He said, we've never heard that name before. So did he know the victims? So is this a random act just by a sick person? Did he case the victims before he did this, or just in some sort of rage just went to the house at 3 o'clock in the morning? But the how is truly the mystery here, right? How do you kill 4 people in a home, not with a gun, but with a knife, and there are other people in that home that never wake up? There had to be screams, because we heard about defensive, they actually fought back, and that's how they got the DNA, because of the defensive part. But here's the thing. The Moscow police chief yesterday said that he cannot 100% confirm that this was the only person that may have been involved in these murders. And you think, how else could he have pulled this off unless he had some kind of help? Because how do you restrain 4 people like that and no one hears anything in the house? Still a lot of questions here, guys.
Or almost as though they're walking in single file out at night at 3 o'clock in the morning, actually closer to 3:12 in the morning. And as you watch those four figures, remember, police say the murders happened between 3 and 4 in the morning. Did those people see something? Who are they? Have police tracked them down, asked them any questions, ruled them out? And again, if they're ruled out, did they see something as they were on foot, walking just steps away from where the murders happened? We do not have the answers to this, any of it. But as usual, our senior national correspondent, Brian Enton, is live on the case. And tonight he is standing in that exact location, right where that body cam action took place. So, Brian, for us looking at it on television, it's hard to get the exact perspective of where the officers were standing, what direction their body cams were pointing, and where those four mysterious figures were walking from and to, and how far away they were from the actual murder scene. So can you take me there and help us get a feel?
Yeah, it's very confusing when you're looking at the body camera video, so hopefully we can give you some perspective. This is Band Field. This is where the alcohol call came in. The young men were here in the field when the police first showed up. That is the Sigma Chi fraternity house right there. So the police walked those young men across the street. This is Taylor Avenue, right to this spot right here. I was able to identify it because of the fire extinguisher. And they were standing in this spot, the young men, and the body camera video was pointed this way. And it is over my shoulder where you could see very faintly what looked like several people walking faster, almost running by in the background. And I want to walk you over, Ashley, and give you a little more perspective. It was somewhere in this area right here. And we can tell because we analyzed these lights of this little apartment building. It was somewhere right in this area. There's another big apartment building here. The question you might be having is, how close is this to the house where the murders happened? Mo is going to point in that direction. Our producer is up there. She's going to flash a flashlight, Ashley. You see that flashlight flashing right there? That is right in front of the house where the murders happened. So it's all very, very close.
So what we're effectively seeing is, like, if my eyes don't deceive me, about 200 yards away from where Mo is flashing the light at the murder scene, those four figures were walking where you're standing. It's that close.
It's that close, and it appears, again, it's so hard to see it in that body camera video, but when we zoom in, it does appear that the figures are walking / running from the direction of where the house is where the murders happened. At first, I thought they were just walking down Taylor Avenue, but when I got out here and really looked at everything, it appears they might actually be coming somewhat from the direction of the house.
First thing we're going to learn is what is a Latin print and how are they collected?
There are latent. These are invisible to the naked eye. They normally need to be lifted with electrostatic dust lifters, using oblique lighting or a gel lifter. You also need to get images of these in order to be processed and analysed. So lifting latent shoe prints are similar to latent fingerprints. They can be dusted with dusting powder and photographed and then lifted with an adhesive tape.
The next thing we're going to learn about, what can the size of the shoe tell us besides the size of the shoe? Get your heads out of the gutter.
Society, I think, Scott, those impressions of footwear impressions, of what we can do from Sherlock Holmes in novels, and that their gait, how they walk. The depth of the foot in soil depends on the density of the soil, much more than the weight of the person. Most I can say with a footprint is if I've got the entire impression, I can estimate a height of the person, but that's just an estimate. It's a good investigative tool. I'm not going to go to court and say he's guilty because he's 6'2" and the footprint is, a size 12.5.
Now, we don't know the size of the Latin shoe print that was found at 1122 King Road, but do we think that they estimated a height on the perpetrator based on this shoe print?
Where impression evidence is, it can help eliminate suspects. And we want to find that out at the beginning of the investigation. We don't want to drag somebody through an entire investigation. If I can tell them right from the get-go, and I have many times, no, that's not your suspect. This is the shoe you're looking for, not that person.
Were any suspects eliminated by the shoe print? Is that why they were able to eliminate people so quickly? But wait, there's more.
But the other type of characteristics we're looking for are the accidental characteristics. These randomly acquired cuts and nicks occur on the bottom of the shoe as you're walking around. And it's those accidental characteristics that make that shoe unique, to say, yes, that shoe made that crime scene impression.
If there's a shoe to match it to, right?
That person. There are other things that I can see at the crime scene. You can see from the impressions themselves who's gone where, who's doing what. You have a homicide scene where a person's bludgeoned to death. In this case, there was sock impressions that had a slight bit of blood on the bottom, and he's walking throughout the house. I'd look at the floor, nice clean hardwood floor. I spray the floor with a chemical that enhances the blood impressions. You can see that where the person's gone to get the scissors and a hammer and pages from a Bible. You can see the movement within the apartment. The footwear impressions were able to give you a visual of what actually occurred at the time. That evidence can be extremely damning, especially when you have the cuts and nicks in the bottom of the shoe. I can say without a doubt that that is the shoe that made it.
Let's dive a little bit deeper. Why are footwear impressions often overlooked? There are two important reasons. Lack of training and education in the proper teaching, collection, and preservation of the evidence, and evidence is undervalued or not understood. The failure to properly collect this type of evidence revolves around the above-mentioned two reasons, but also the lack of success in finding this evidence is often due to A, not believing that the impressions can be found at the scene after people have walked over the scene, B, incomplete searches of the crime scene, C, weather conditions, and D, the impression has been intentionally destroyed. So in the Idaho 4 case, we know that it wasn't found on the first sweep of the house. This Latin footprint was found on the second sweep of that house. Protection of the scene. The first officer at the crime scene should assess an attempt to determine the entire area of the crime scene, including paths of entry and exit, and any areas that may include evidence that a suspect was present. Once this has been done, the area of the crime scene should be completely secured and evidence marked for later documentation and collection. Unfortunately, footwear evidence is easily eradicated by weather or people and vehicles approaching the scene from the same direction or of entry or escape the suspect might have taken. Isolation of the area is crucial to avoid analyzing recently made footwear impressions that are not related to the crime scene. There are many ways to secure footwear evidence in and around the crime scene. Once the area is secured and the crime scene is established, the officer on scene should make sure the entire scene is marked off using crime scene barricade tape, and no one should be permitted to enter until the crime scene investigator responds. In some cases where weather might have an effect on footwear evidence, the first officer may place boxes, cones, etc. over the impressions until the crime scene investigator arrives. Remember, do not alter the evidence prior to any photographs. Knowing this information makes me really anxious for the evidence to come out in trial.
University of Idaho apparently teaches their students that secret fight clubs are okay, and then it's okay to lie about it and to do heinous things. I mean, seriously. This is what this was. It was a fight club. It was a fight that night. They hired real fighters. They were down at the grub truck in robes, nonetheless. Who knows? I think the cops might have been under, of course, they were plain clothes that night. This is all my opinion here, but I believe this to be true, absolutely. And I know the Fight Club was true. That I do know happened.
Emma and D, M and D, they sell drugs to the community. Like that's like that's known.
Yeah, there's some of the dealers here.
There's
like,
some of them.
Well, like they are like the dealers in town, is what I would say.
Okay, and then like
I would say most of the party drugs are coming through. Were coming through them.
Emma Bailey was known in that, like everybody knew in that house who she was, and she'd be over there, and whoever she was hanging out with would be over there from time to time.
Yeah, she had a lot of friends, so she would be here. I mean, she could be anywhere from 3 to 5, 6 different places, plus the bars in a night.
Okay.
Like she was,
So she's
like
bouncing
that's
around.
one thing. Yeah, like she was like a hustler in the aspect of like she worked hard. Like she would always be like going somewhere to go do something.
Riches Investigates. I am covering the Moscow, Idaho Brian Kohlberger case. There is a lot of curiosity revolving around Emma Bailey. Emma Bailey, the 22-year-old individual that lived right behind the Moscow, Idaho home. She was arrested, charged with giving fatal drugs to a 22-year-old University of Idaho student named Caden Young. She was with a guy named Demetrius Robinson, and people want to know, is she connected to Brian Kohlberger or the Moscow, Idaho case in any way? And people have been saying that Emma Bailey's case just got dismissed. I looked into it. Yes, it did get dismissed. 2 people allegedly connected to March overdose death in Centralia released days before scheduled trial. Emma Bailey, 22, of Moscow, Idaho, and Demetrius R. Robinson, 36. They both had their charges dropped. Why? Was this a jurisdictional issue, or is there something else to it? Will they be recharged in another area? Why was their case dismissed right before scheduled trial?
University of Idaho Jr. was announced Thursday by Dean of Students Blaine Eccles.
Originally from Boise, Caden Young was majoring in journalism at UI. Described as an involved student, Young held multiple leadership roles on campus and was a former president of Alpha Kappa Lambda. This has understandably been a difficult year for the Vandal family, with the loss of several students since the start of the academic year last August. Said Blaine Eccles, "Please make sure to take care of yourself and others." 2 people were arrested in connection with the death of Caden Young. The university announced on Thursday that Caden Young, a junior from Boise, had died while away from Moscow. On Tuesday, the Centralia Police Department announced a 22-year-old man was found dead at a Centralia apartment, and 2 people were arrested. Lewis County Coroner Warren McLeod on Friday confirmed the person who died was in fact Young. His official cause of death was still undetermined pending a toxicology report. Police do suspect that fentanyl was involved. According to a Centralia Police Department news release, officers were dispatched to an apartment after a friend found the victim unconscious and not breathing. He died at the apartment. A preliminary investigation revealed information that illegal drug use was involved in the cause of death. Evidence led police to identify 2 people who were allegedly involved in providing illegal drugs to Young. Police arrested 22-year-old Emma Bailey of Moscow and 36-year-old Demetrius Robinson of Tacoma for delivery of a controlled substance. They were booked into Lewis County Jail. The Chronicle newspaper had reported Wednesday that Bailey and Robinson are accused of delivering cocaine to the victim before he overdosed at a party in Seattle the night he died. The victim reportedly received care at Harborview Medical Center in Seattle and was later discharged and picked up by a friend who lives in Centralia. According to the Chronicle, the friend told law enforcement that shortly before calling 911, the man went to sleep and stopped breathing. The Centralia Police Department's news release offered a warning about fentanyl. The poisonous effects of fentanyl are killing individuals and devastating families, the news release states. The Centralia Police Department said its priority to reduce drug trafficking, citing, quote, recent amounts of deadly fentanyl that have been seized in our area. According to the University of Idaho, Young was majoring in journalism and was a past president of the Alpha Kappa Lambda fraternity. Stay with What's the 411 for any new updates on this story.
Welcome back to the program. So we know the suspect was a criminal justice major. We know he was pursuing his PhD. We know that he had postings talking about he wanted to know why criminals do what they do, but who really was this suspect? So we wanted to bring in someone that knew the person in a prior life. I want to bring in someone who knew him, the suspect personally, Rich Pasqua. You worked with him for a period of time. Rich, what can you tell me about the suspect? What was he like?
He was just your average guy. I met him through some friends, and they told me that he was a little weird, and he was a little socially awkward, I guess you could say. But he wasn't a bad guy. He needed a job, so I worked at a pizza shop at that time, and they were hiring. I said, yeah, come on in and apply, and he did, and he got the job. So I worked with him for a little bit. But he was quiet, though.
What
he
was
didn't ever come off
conversation like with
violent or
him?
What was that?
What was conversation like with him? Like when you talk with him at work, would he look you in your eyes? Did he have friends? Did he have a girlfriend at the time?
It was so long ago. It was like 2013, but he didn't have a girlfriend. I do remember that. And my wife went to school with him. They graduated together, and she doesn't remember him ever having a girlfriend, and I don't remember him ever having a girlfriend. And he didn't have many friends, so he would do anything to fit in, and would do he just wanted to be liked by everybody. But he wasn't a bad kid. He was all right. And I knew his sister. I went to school with his sister, and I knew his father worked for the school, and I believe his mother did too. But his family, they were all nice people, and his dad was always really nice to me, very polite. But I never thought that he would do something like that.
Good copy. So we've heard from some people that surrounded him that there may have been drug use in his life prior as well. Did you know him to use drugs or anything like that, sir?
Yeah, he did use drugs. That's how I really know him too. He was a big heroin addict, and so was I. I got 6 years clean now. I work in treatment and everything, but back then I was using, and so that's how I know for a fact he was using. I've got high with him a couple times and used with him, and I remember one night we went out and his car broke down, and his dad had to come out, and he got pretty angry because his car broke down and everything, and we couldn't get what we needed that night. I knew other people that dealt drugs, and we would deliver drugs to him a lot, and so that's when I heard about this case. I haven't heard from him in so long, and then I heard about this, and it said that he was going to college. I said, I haven't heard from him. I guess that's what he's been doing. He must have cleaned up. I know he was in and out of rehab a couple times, but he really did. He cleaned up and was going to college all these years.
Rich, I'm short on time, but I got to ask you one last question. We've heard from people that he had a track record of being inappropriate, borderline offensive to women. Did you ever see that in any of your interactions with him and interactions with women?
Not in my time knowing him. I've never seen him ever act like that towards women. I've never seen him come off that way ever towards anybody.
Yeah. Rich, thank you so much for joining the program. I'm sorry I'm short on time. Hopefully you'll come back.
Brian worked as a fish cutter. He was a fillet man when he was in high school, trained to cut and fillet raw fish. What did you teach him how to do, and what did you learn about him?
As far as filleting fish, he never got proficient at it. After he was here several times, it became obvious to me that this job just wasn't for him. He wasn't able to make eye contact with customers and be friendly to them. And he never got good enough for us to allow him to fillet customers' fish. So I talked to his direct supervisor, who already was on board and saw the situation. He talked to Brian, and really mutually they decided that that job was not for him.
Any doubt in your mind that hazing contributed to your son's death?
No. We believe the rituals that were part of this fraternity had dangerous components that contributed to his adverse mental and physical health.
In August, John and Colleen Tyler dropped their son Luke off at WSU to kick off his college career. He couldn't wait to be a Coug and a Theta Chi fraternity member. That's him outside the house under the flag last summer. 5 months later, this 19-year-old died by suicide. The coroner found a toxic mix of alcohol and Wellbutrin, a commonly used antidepressant, in his system.
Every day is a new day to just realize he's gone again. And suicide was the furthest thing from our mind.
The Tylers say suicide was unthinkable. Luke had never shown any signs of depression, no indication of mental health issues whatsoever.
Couldn't believe it. Couldn't understand why. The family was full of love, direction. It was, when I heard that, it didn't make any sense.
Luke's parents say they didn't send a troubled teenager off to school, but a young man full of life and hope, a dedicated family member who loved boating, teaching sailing to little kids, travel, adventure, and sports.
Go, Luke! Go, Luke!
That's him, number 21, playing lacrosse.
Oh, yeah, Luke!
Luke was also a nutrition and fitness buff. He even entered a bodybuilding competition and won it. The Tylers say this was the picture of their son, a freshman just starting out with goals, friends, and support.
It's just such a dichotomy between the bright, healthy young man that we sent to WSU and in a very, very short amount of time, him having, depression or needing antidepressants and then taking his life that way. It doesn't make sense.
After his death, the parents say they found out Luke had kept a troubling part of college from them. At least 6 friends came forward saying he was struggling with hazing at the fraternity.
What he expressed to his friends was that it wasn't what he thought it was, and that it did push him to his breaking point.
A few of those friends started this petition, urging the school to shut down Theta Chi, because they said Luke's death followed a long and cruel pledging process.
Brent Kapaka's FOIA request. It's in. Just a reminder, be nice to one another tonight if you're in chat.
Literally just moments ago, who gave us a slight update on the situation. So now we did learn that around 8:37 last night, police received a phone call from actually this apartment complex right behind us. And they didn't tell us who called, but we do know that a man in his 30s was threatening to harm his roommates. So at that time, police did respond. They were able to get those two roommates out safely. We're told that they're doing fine at this time, but we're also told that a member of the SWAT unit did shoot and kill that 30-year-old suspect who was threatening to harm his roommates. Now, again, police have told us that this is the early stages of the investigation, so they are continuing to work. And again, this is a very active scene behind me right now. While we just got here at this area, we saw another couple of police cars who pulled up from Pullman Police, but we're also told that Washington State Police are actually on their way as well. They're the ones who actually have to clear this scene. As you can see, there's still a lot of crime tape, and this section of the street right near Stadium Way is still closed off. Traffic is being slightly rerouted, but it's not a major impact to traffic in the area just yet. There's just a few lanes that are closed, and people are taking the slight detour in the area as well. So now we're going to continue gathering more information for you all and try and speak to some students here who are impacted, because of course this is late in the semester. I'm sure a lot of people have finals and those late classes to get to, or early classes rather, to get to this morning. So we're going to continue gathering the latest.
So on December 14th, 2022, at about 8:37 p.m., our officers were dispatched to the 1000 block of Latah Street for a weapon offense. Officers learned a male in his 30s was threatening to kill his roommates. The roommates were evacuated from the apartment, and police officers attempted to speak with that male, who barricaded himself inside of his apartment. Pullman PD crisis negotiators and the Whitman County Regional SWAT team responded. The suspect began firing from his apartment. The area was evacuated. After unsuccessful negotiations, his escalating behavior, and a continued danger to the public and others, the male was shot by a member of the Whitman County Regional SWAT team. The suspect was found deceased when the Whitman County Regional SWAT team cleared the apartment. On behalf of the Whitman County Regional SWAT team, Pullman PD has requested assistance of the Washington State Patrol to investigate the officer-involved shooting. Further information will be released by the Washington State Patrol. Per RCW 43102, this investigation must be completely independent of the agency whose officer was involved in the use of deadly force. The Whitman County Regional SWAT team is made up of officers from the Whitman County Sheriff's Office, Pullman Police Department, and the WSU Police Department. Thank you.
Although we might think that DNA evidence is always accurate and reliable, it definitely has its limitations in forensic investigations. As new technology and software is developed, it has made the issue of DNA transfer more complicated for forensic scientists. Each new tool is more sensitive than the last, but with this enhanced sensitivity comes the need for a greater understanding of how and why DNA can undergo secondary and even tertiary transfer. The case of Lucas Anderson is a great example of these weaknesses, and why it's important not to rely on just one single piece of evidence, and to always investigate further and gather additional corroborating evidence. Late in the evening of the 29th of November 2012, 66-year-old Ravish Kumra, known as Ravi, was watching TV in his 7,000 square foot Monte Sereno home in California, while his estranged wife Harinder Kumra was asleep upstairs. Suddenly, Ravi was ambushed by multiple intruders who tied him up, blindfolded him, and gagged him with tape. They then went upstairs where they proceeded to hit Harinder before tying her up and leaving her next to Ravi. For over 2 hours, the thieves rummaged through the mansion, searching for valuables to steal, at the same time that Ravi was slowly suffocating from the duct tape they had placed over his eyes, nose, and mouth. When the intruders eventually left, Harinder crawled into the kitchen and was able to call 911. Unfortunately, when paramedics arrived, they pronounced Ravi dead. An autopsy would later conclude that he had died from suffocation. As crime scene technicians processed the home, it began to appear as though the intruders had been somewhat forensically aware. They had worn latex gloves while committing the burglary, and a pile of them were left in the kitchen sink covered in soap and water. The majority of tests performed on the gloves only revealed DNA profiles consistent with Ravi and Harinder. However, further testing of the other items of evidence eventually revealed a mixture of 3 different DNA profiles. When these were run through the state database, there were 3 separate matches to felons from the Bay Area. 22-year-old D'Angelo Austin's DNA was found on the duct tape. 21-year-old Javier Garcia's DNA was found on the gloves. And 26-year-old Lucas Anderson's DNA had been found on the fingernail clippings of the victim that had been taken at autopsy. Within a few weeks of these results, Sergeant Erin Lunsford, who was in charge of the investigation, had compiled substantial evidence that implicated both Austin and Garcia in the murder, including their cell phone records that showed pings near Monte Sereno on the night of the murder. Detectives found it harder to link Lucas Anderson to the crime though, but a felony residential burglary on his criminal record and a parole violation were enough to keep them investigating. Eventually, they were able to find a loose connection between Lucas Anderson and one of the main suspects, D'Angelo Austin. A year before the murder, Austin's friend had shared a prison cell with Anderson. This friend and Austin had travelled to the San Jose area 2 days before the murder, stopping off in Lucas Anderson's known neighbourhood. Police suspected that Austin and his friend brought Anderson into the plan to break into Ravi Kumra's home because he was born and raised in the area and knew it well. For the police, this connection was enough, and he was soon arrested on suspicion of murder. At just 26 years old, Lucas Anderson was living a troubled life. He was homeless and spent his days begging for change in the downtown area of San Jose. He regularly drank alcohol to excess, and so, when he was arrested and faced with the DNA evidence, he was confused about the accusations made against him. Anderson told his public defender, Kelly Kulik, "I drink a lot, maybe I did do it," fearing that he had blacked out and had no memory of committing the crime. Due to the death penalty being a potential outcome for her client, Kelly Kulik had requested all medical records relating to Lucas Anderson, and that's when she struck gold. On the 29th of November, the same day that Ravi was killed, Lucas Anderson had as solid of an alibi as you can get. Kulik retraced her client's day and eventually found that Anderson was seen sitting in front of a store at around 8:15 p.m. and was obviously intoxicated. A few hours later, seemingly even more drunk than before, he wandered into the store and collapsed in an aisle, forcing the clerk to call for help. A paramedic with the fire department that attended the scene knew Lucas Anderson's date of birth by memory because of how often he encountered him, and they were able to admit him into the Valley Medical Center at 10:45 p.m., where he remained under supervision for the rest of the night detoxing. The Santa Clara District Attorney's Office reviewed the case and were unable to uncover any errors, contamination, or improper use of tools at the forensic lab that had tested the evidence. So how could Lucas Anderson's DNA have gotten under the fingernails of someone he did not know? DNA transfer is definitely more common than most people believe. Research has found that the average person can shed upwards of 50 million skin cells a day, making it possible to leave traces of your DNA almost anywhere you go. A study published in 2013 specifically looked at direct and indirect transfer of DNA between people and objects. The researchers repeated this with multiple different groups, but essentially they had 3 volunteers sit in a sterilised room and share a jug of juice, and after 20 minutes of chatting, the researchers re-entered and swabbed the volunteers' hands, the chairs, the table, the jug, and the cups in order to test for genetic material. Unsurprisingly, since each volunteer touched the jug at least once, each of their DNA was found on the handle of the jug. Despite not having any physical contact with one another, 1/3 of the volunteers were found to have another volunteer's DNA on their palm. But most interestingly of all, the researchers detected foreign DNA, profiles that didn't match any of the volunteers, on roughly half of the chairs and cups, and all over the volunteers' hands and the table. This means that the volunteers had unwittingly brought unknown DNA into the room with them. This could have been someone who handed them their morning coffee or who brushed past them while they were on the train. And this demonstrates just how easy it can be for DNA to be transferred between people, places, and objects.
Now, isn't that crazy? Now, isn't that crazy? Now, isn't that crazy? Now, isn't that crazy?